हेलो दोस्तों, कैसे हो आप सब। होप करता हूँ आप सब बहुत बढ़िया होंगे और मैं भी बढ़िया हूँ। इसका बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट का पार्ट 1 तो आ गया है वीडियो। ये सेकंड पार्ट है। नहीं, अगर आपने फर्स्ट पार्ट नहीं देखे हो तो इस वीडियो के लास्ट में जाके या अभी आई बटन पे वो आ जाएगा, वो देख लो, फिर इसको देख लो आप। और इसका कंक्लूजन देखना हो तो लाइव भी ज्वाइन कर लिया करो आप। टाइमिंग ऊपर से देख लो आप, बैनर पे लगा होगा टाइमिंग क्या है लाइव का, उसमें आप डेली वीडियो का डेली कंक्लूजन मिल जाएगा। फिर शाम तक आपको ये इंपॉर्टेंट नोट्स मिल जाएगा। सब्सक्राइब कर लो रेगुलर ये नोट्स लेने के लिए, मेरे साथ पढ़ो। Components of balance of payments. Components of balance of payments. First one is current account, second one is capital account, and third one is official reserve transaction, and fourth one is errors and omission. Errors and omission. First one is balance of payment, surplus are and deficit. Balance of payments are surplus and deficit. A country that has a deficit in its current account, spending more than it receives from sales to the rest of the world, must finance it by selling assets or by borrowing from abroad to maintain equilibrium at the balance of payment. It is to be noted that the net balance of payment of the entire world is zero. It is to be noted that the net balance of payment of the entire world is zero. Thus any current account deficit must be financed by a capital account surplus, that is a net capital inflow. That is a net capital inflow. If current account plus capital account is equal to zero, if current account plus capital account is equal to zero, in this case a country is said to be in balance of payments equilibrium. Balance of payment equilibrium. The current account deficit is financed entirely by international lending without any reserve movement. Official reserve transaction are buying and selling of currency in the market by the RBI. When the economy is in deficit, foreign currencies are sold in the exchange market, and when the economy is in surplus, they are purchased. The Reserve Bank sells foreign exchange when there is a deficit. This is called official reserve sale. The decrease in official reserve is called the overall balance of payment. It's called the overall balance of payments deficit, whereas in the increase in official reserve is called the overall balance of payment surplus. According to RBI October 2022 bulletin, India has foreign exchange reserves worth 532.9 billion that account for 8.7 months worth of imports projected for the current financial year. Balance of trade beauty. Balance of trade. The balance of trade is the difference between the value of export and the value of import of goods of a country in a given time period of time. Export of goods is entered as a credit item in both balance of trade, whereas import of goods is entered as a debit item in balance of trade. It is also known as trade balance. Balance of trade is said to be in balance when export of goods are equal to import of goods. Import of goods. Surplus balance of trade or trade surplus will arise if a country exports more goods than what it imports. Deficit balance of trade or trade deficit will arise if a country import more goods than what it exports. It includes the visual part of the current account. It includes the visual part of the current account of balance of payment. It only constitutes the trade in goods and does not contain services. In terms of value, India is a trade deficit country. The import is greater than export. Balance of payment, BOP crisis. BOP crisis, the balance of payment. BOP crisis. The BOP can either be positive or negative. Case 1. If BOP is negative, for example, minus 15 billion US dollar, the forex reserve is 600 billion US dollar. The situation of crisis does not arise. Case 2. If BOP is negative, for example, minus 50 billion US dollar, the forex reserve is 30 billion US dollar. This situation of BOP is of the BOP crisis, balance of payment crisis. Hence, BOP crisis occurs BOP deficit BOP deficit is greater than forex reserve with the with the central bank of the country. In case of the balance of payment crisis, the international monetary fund IMF extends loan to the country in crisis under the precondition that borrowing country would undertake a structural reform in its economy to avoid a domino effect in the world economy. India faced the BOP crisis in 1991 and approached the IMF and World Bank for loans. India agreed to the conditionalities of the World Bank and IMF and announced the new economic policy NEP. The NEP consisted of wide ranging economic reforms known as or the LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. A domino effect or chain reaction is the cumulative effect generated when a particular event trigger a chain of similar events Trade deficit occurs when the value of imports by a country exceeds its export value of value of imports by a country exceeds its export. The reason why a country imports more goods are the reasons why a country imports more goods are: first one, if there is no production done domestically, if the production done is not sufficient to meet the domestic demands, and the third one is production is sufficient but costly and of inferior quality. Example, the Indian automobile industry imports good quality cheaper steel from China despite having domestic production. The import can be reduced either by increasing the production or reducing the consumption. Trade deficit case of India. India currently faces a trade deficit as the value of its import is much more than the exports done by India. The top 5 import of India as percentage of total import as of May 22 are crude oil and petroleum 29.93%, gold 9.6%, and electronic goods 8.98%, coal 8.80%, and machinery 5.14%, reducing the oil imports to reduce the trade deficit and to make the balance of trade surplus. The government of India has set a target to boost the domestic oil production by 10% by 2002. This requires a proper oil exploration policy of India, new exploration licensing policy NELP in 1997. It was formulated in 1997 and it became effective in 1999. The main objective was to attract Indian and foreign oil companies to explore oil and gas resources in in the country to meet rising demands of oil and gas. Since then, licenses for exploration are being awarded only through a competitive bidding system, and national oil companies (NOCs) are required to compete on an equal footing with Indian and foreign companies to secure petroleum exploration licenses. Production sharing contract model. Production sharing contract model. The new exploration licensing policy of 1997 was based on the production sharing contract model. Under this model, the oil producing companies had to share a portion of profit earned with the government. However, these companies would lower the production. These companies would lower the production or show lesser profit, causing revenue loss from the government. Hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy help in 2016. 2016 में क्या है, एक हाइड्रो in 2016 a hydro exploration licensing has produced uniform license. This policy has a single license that will cover exploration and production of all types of hydrocarbons, which conventional oil and gas, coal bed, methane, shale oil, gas, hydrates, etc. Revenue sharing model simple, easy to monitor, only two monitoring parameters for the government, which is the revenue and production of the contractor. This policy has replaced the earlier model of production sharing contract. This policy has replaced the earlier model of production sharing contract PSC. Reduced and graded royalty rates to encourage exploration in deep water and ultra deep water areas. The royalty was exempted for the first 7 years and subsequently royalty of 5% and 2% applicable in deep water and ultra deep water areas respectively. Open acreage licensing OL mechanism. It gives an option to a company looking for exploration hydrocarbon to select the exploration blocks on its own without waiting for the formal bid round from the government. Marketing and pricing freedom of the crude oil and natural gas produces. A strategic petroleum reserve is a stockpile of crude oil held by a government or a private company to ensure economic and national security during an energy crisis. The strategic reserve held by a country is in addition to the existing storage of crude oil and petroleum product with oil companies. The concept of having a strategic petroleum reserve originated during the 1973 energy crisis. The presence of petroleum reserves would stop a sudden price hike in the events of a global crisis and would discourage the use of oil as a political weapon. Indian strategic Indian strategic petroleum reserves Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves SPR first goal has set up 5.33 MMT of a strategic crude oil storage in SPR phase 1 at following three locations: Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh में, Mangalore in Karnataka and Padur in Karnataka. SPR 1 strategic petroleum reserves first has been commissioned and dedicated to the nation in February 2019, and a strategic petroleum reserve second, another 6.5 mmT of a strategic crude reserve is being planned in SPR strategic petroleum reserve second at Chandikhola, Odisha and Padur in Karnataka. Here in map Chandikhola and Visakhapatnam, Padur and Mangalore. Upcoming crude oil storage capacity under strategic petroleum reserves. Second is 4 MMT Chandikhola, Odisha and 2.5 MMT Padur, Karnataka. Existing crude oil storage capacity under strategic petroleum reserves first 1.33 MMT Visakhapatnam AP and 1.5 MMT Mangalore Karnataka and 2.5 MMT Padur Karnataka. This is the last. International Energy Agency (IEA) International Energy Agency was established in 1974 to ensure security of oil supply and solidarity amongst major industrial countries in dealing with energy crisis. IEA International Energy Agency contains the international energy programs. In its framework, it commits the member countries of maintain sufficient oil reserves to have an emergency responses for at least 90 days. India signed it in 2017. India Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited (ISPRL), Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited, a Government of India a special purpose vehicle has established a strategic petroleum reserves SPR facility at three locations in phase 1, namely Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh, Mangaluru, Karnataka, Padur, Karnataka, as per the consumption pattern of 2019-2020. The total capacity of the strategic oil reserves is estimated to provide for about 9.5 days of crude oil requirement. In addition, oil marketing companies in the country have a storage facility for crude oil and petroleum product for 64.5 days. Thus, the current total national capacity for storage of crude oil and petroleum products currently is 74. Under Phase 2 of the SPR Strategic Petroleum Reserve Program, the government has given in principle approval in 2018 for establishing two additional SPR facilities at Chandikhola in Odisha and Padur in Karnataka. So people, thank you so much. एंड वन रिक्वेस्ट, सब्सक्राइब कर लेना और लाइव में ज़रूर आप एक कंक्लूजन देखो, ठीक है, और साथ साथ मेरे पढ़ाई करो। और एक और चीज़, इसमें जो भी चीज़ जैसे आपको डिफ़िकल्ट लगे एक बार गूगल करना, ठीक, गूगल करने पे जो 3-4 लाइन का वो एक समरी आता है ना, उसे पढ़ो आप, उसके बाद उसको कमेंट करना। ओके, थैंक यू, मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में।